Hi there guys, we're Micromundo, a small furniture design studio here in Barcelona. And today what we're going to do is demonstrating a couple of tools. The first one is the Virutex FR160P. It's a plunge router. So the reason for this is that when we were starting out buying gear here, there was no information available about this. Okay, the company's own website, when you find it, explains certain things, but there's not much video content. So with every other brand, you find all the information under the sun. There are web pages that, a lot of people have, YouTube channels for this kind of thing. And we thought, right, okay, it's a good tool. Let's take a look at it. So just general things. You'll notice in this video, a lot of our gear, supporting gear for this is actually homemade. This is because there are little bits and pieces that I find that probably no company manufactures. Stuff like this, if you have your router down already with a bit in it, you maybe don't want to leave it lying on the worktop, especially if you've got various things attached to it. For this reason, I always make a base with a space in the middle, so that even if the router's down with a bit installed, you can set it level and know that it's not going to fall over. It's just a basic thing. This might work for any router. Okay, the router itself. The good points with Virutex would be that they make a very solid tool in general. Okay, the bad points, they can be a little bit Soviet, let's say, rough around the edges, maybe not in terms of finish, but basic. They don't add a lot of fancy features. They don't add any gimmicks. And if that's the kind of tool you like, then this is right up your street. Okay, basic functions. I mentioned because it's a plunge router. You've got a little tower here, which controls height, your basic depth setting options here. 6 options. So you push down, there's a lever at the back, lock it in position, and that gives you one of your options for height. Now, this little rod here can be adjusted. I don't use it a lot in fairness, but you can adjust it to whatever height you want. Part of the reason that I don't do this very often is because there's another option round the back. These 2 nuts can be varied in height so that you can set the router any given height and lock it in position by tightening both nuts. Plus points of this, I suppose, if you've got a really specific height you want to measure by eye, this is obviously really handy. You're not measuring anything. Maybe you're just locking the router in position based on a cut you want to make. Perfect. The thing you'll probably find is the teeth of most wrenches won't fit terribly well in this space and doesn't give you much play to actually tighten it. Underneath, obviously, here there's no interference, but that's a feature I don't particularly like. The grip, obviously here, you have your extraction point here for whatever you want to fix on. At the time when we bought this, we already had a small vacuum cleaner, so I fashioned this. This kind of thing can be done really, really easily with, usually they give you extra tubes when you buy any vacuum cleaner. You make a number of slits right across, they don't need to be wide cuts, just to kind of weaken the structure a little bit. And you can adjust the shape however you want and tighten it with duct tape. I've done this numerous times, so this one's probably a little bit tight. You would get the idea. Probably you want it tighter. Yeah, really tight, maybe cold. There you go. Tighter sooner than looser, and then your tube for the hard tube for the vacuum cleaner goes onto that. I find that works really, really well. You want to buy custom gear that comes with it, fire away. I'm always looking for an option that's not to cut corners, to cut cost. At the time I wasn't convinced. Sometimes with optional extras, that's where they get you, and you end up paying over the odds. I don't know. In this case, I'm not sure what it was. We just had the gear already. So your standard here for any tool of this kind, double switches for safety reasons here. Okay, those both got to be in position. I always do the small one first, and then the main switch. And when they cut out, either one, that'll stop the machine. See that in a moment. So, gimmicks, none whatsoever. You'll find it's comfortable to use. The only thing I don't like about the way the machine operates is there's a little bit of a jump when you fire up. It's not smooth. By contrast with perhaps the equivalent size of Festool router I've seen, which fires up very as smoothly as it runs, you're a lot less likely to damage a workpiece. It's something you have to be, you have to bear in mind. But the price tag is another one, so that's something too. Okay, with this and just in general, when we're working, I'm not wearing safety footwear. If anybody's going to point that out, maybe they will. I don't work with a lot of heavy equipment in general. If I was, I have steel toe cap boots. The other side of the workshop, if I was working with heavy gear on my job site, these are your friends. The most sensitive and powerful piece of equipment in your workshop, probably, if it's not your brain, it will be your eyes. And you only get one set. Same goes for ears. Good set of ear defenders. These are Rotor by 3M. I like them. They make a more heavy duty one. They fit very, very well. It cost more than the average, but they last forever. And we use a Climax Spanish make of mask. Now, people who maybe want to work without this and develop respiratory problems are welcome to do whatever they want with their eyes, lungs and ears, but I strongly recommend that you use this because you're working with fine dust from hardwoods, softwoods, or worse, MDF. This will really do you long-term harm. Okay folks, let's continue. There are lots of optional extras available for this router in particular, and I'm just going to show you a couple of these things you might be interested in. The first one is this rail that we bought, a good quality aluminium rail, very robust, that we actually bought for their circular saw. Now, we weren't fans of their circular saw, found it a bit chunky, and the system for fixing it onto this rail is antiquated. As simple as that, it's just totally out of date. Anybody who's used the equivalent Festool circular saw, that you just set the rail down, set the tool on top of it, and it just runs along and there's no monkeying about. Anyone who's used that wouldn't even look twice at this. But if for whatever reason you're interested in being able to fix the router in position, that may be the case. Because of the length of the bench, I can only show you one. But this little clamp slides into the profile and then can be tightened up, and they come with it. Standard little clamps. And then you have this bracket here, which you have to fix into position. This can be dismantled. That would be the good thing about this, because I never use it, so it's stored in the box for the router that I had to make. It fits onto the rail and runs along its length. There's a little bit of action in it, which again I don't like, but it's going to give you a reasonable result. Slots into these two holes exactly the same as the guide does, and tightens at the back with these little fasteners here. I don't know what you call them, those little knobs that screw down and hold the bars in position. So that's something you might want to consider. Similarly, something that I would recommend that they manufacture is their dovetailing jig. So I've got the components for the dovetailing jig sitting out here so you can see how they work. These, what you've got, obviously it's a standard idea. You're going to have to use 3 different sizes of dovetailing bit. Okay, so you're going to have to work with a copying piece. And it has its good and bad points. Again, I'm not here to market tools for anybody. I'm not being paid to do this, so I'm just giving my opinion. As many other people did when we were starting out, we looked at a lot of people's comments and watched a lot of videos to get ideas, so I'm trying to give something back. I'm not on commission from Festool or Virutex or anyone, just our opinion. These copying pieces fit onto the bottom of the router. Now, what you'll notice is there's a little countersunk hole on either side, and there's a thread built into the casing of the chassis of the machine. Perfect the first time, maybe the second time, but as soon as some fine dust from MDF or something like that gets its way in there, good luck removing it. And you often find you've got to fiddle about quite a bit to get the screws to go in and sit neatly in there, because you don't want any play in this. As it is, they don't fit 100%. To my mind, it should fit a little bit more neatly than that. So if you've used quick release, again, you're not going to look twice at this. These little offset pieces for 34, 26 and 16 mil dovetailing bits. Every kit comes with a comb, the copying piece, and these little offsets. And you can put one at either end if you want, okay? So we have a range of combs here, and you'll see all sorts of sizes and so on that fit into the dovetailing jig I'm about to explain. So let's go around and take a look at that. Very well made piece of equipment. It's at this point I would have to point out that I haven't actually ever used any other dovetailing jig, so my opinion of this tool may not be as useful to you as someone who can compare more than one device. What I would say is it's all the components that can be made out of metal are. Everything on it is made of durable plastics. If it's made of plastic, and everything else is aluminium or steel. And I like it. So you've decided the dovetail that you want to cut. What's the next step? You install the comb on the other side. And in this case, we're using the 26mm. So what's your comb doing? Imagine that it's the opposite way around. It's fitted in the router. What you're doing is you're following the exact shape of the comb. If you've never used one of these before, takes a wee bit of a knack to get the idea what it is you're trying to do. So it's going to follow around and it's going to copy the exact shape that you're forcing it into. Okay, that's what your copying bits are for in general, if you want to copy any shape. If you've never used one of these, they're great. You have to make some kind of shape first, and then you slot it into it, and it runs along this edge and won't let the router cut any further. In the case of a dovetailing jig, it's what you do to get it to fit exactly in the comb. So in this case, you have your comb installed, and you have the correct copying piece screwed firmly into the bottom of the router, and you've selected the correct bit. I bought all the dovetailing bits from Virutex directly. I think their bits are good, seem to be well manufactured. I've never had any problems so far with their dovetailing bits or any of the router bits I've bought from them. This is just a little block of wood that I prepared to protect those and have them stored neatly away. This is the way we do everything. If you can save a little bit of money on gimmicks and make it yourself, that's what I recommend. Okay, so your two pieces, how do they fit in? You imagine you have your vertical piece clamps in like so. Okay, so you decide this is where you're going to cut one part of your joint. Okay, and then your horizontal piece. I had it pre-installed. Move that back a little bit. What you'll find is your little offset bit is down here underneath. It's screwed straight onto the edge of the piece. Okay, straight onto the device itself. Okay, you take this and you slide it up into the machine against the bottom edge of the comb, and that offset piece won't let it move any further in that direction. And you just give it a light clamp with both of the handles. Hold it in position. Then you do the same with the top one. You just loosen it a little bit, slide your piece in, and there's a built-in limit at this end, which is a little bit further back. And that offset they've created with the piece you've screwed in place, you have to make sure you use the right one for the size that you're using, because otherwise the offset won't be correct and the shape will be cut wrongly. Key thing with this, you've got to get this top edge totally flush. So you can't necessarily screw all the handles, both the handles on one side in place. You have to work at it a little bit and get them all in position. If these whatever your workpiece is flush at both ends, like this piece is, and you've got it reasonably secure here, I have this screwed permanently to just a piece of chipboard, and then I can clamp it in place against the screws underneath, so it's nice and solid. That's not going to go anywhere, and I'll show you how those can be cut. Okay. Okay, the next thing we're going to take a look at is this guide. It's one of the options that comes as standard with this router, and I personally really like it. Okay, the problem I had with it initially was that the bracket itself comes with these two little plastic pieces installed. It's the same black durable plastic that they use for pretty much everything. But I found that it didn't support the machine for long enough when a cut was complete, and I found that led to a bit of wobbling. So this may look absurd to pros that have been doing this kind of thing a long time, but I personally find it adds a lot of stability. It's a couple of 10mm strips of 10mm MDF glued and screwed in position, and when you go to add this to the machine, clip it on, you'll find a couple of holes there, slide right through, and then with your bit in place, I had to cut this on more than one occasion for various jobs that I had to do, but you don't lose any stability for that. It can slide back and forward to whatever depth you want, and I'll demonstrate that with a cut in a moment. Okay, so you probably notice in the course of this that a lot of these things are modified or are in and of themselves handmade. For example, the box. If you're a pro and you're looking to spend a little bit less money on a router to take to a job site, something that you want to last, that'll take a few knocks, and you're not too fussed about gimmicky features of any kind, one thing you may want to bear in mind is that it doesn't come with a box. I had to just drop this together. I actually dovetailed it, incidentally, out of 10mm MDF, surprise, surprise, and screwed a couple of little wooden handles on it. Black foam base and a few side pieces to give it a little bit of stability. That's that. Okay, so what we'll do then is we'll move on to a couple of cuts. Now, what might be interesting here is if you, for example, you want to make a lid for a box. Now, if you don't have a table router or you're working with a small piece like this, and you don't necessarily want to put your fingers that close to a massive bit underneath the supports that guide a table router, you might find that puts your fingers very, very close. You might find that's the sort of thing that you want to be able to do by with a portable router, or it may be the case you simply don't have a table router, as is my case. So we'll take a look at how one of those cuts might work. Okay, so the thing would be obviously to show anyone who might be considering this how to fit bits to the router. This is not a quick release tool, and this is one of the features that I've personally struggled a little bit with because it slows the operation down. But okay, let's take a look at how the collet works. I'm working here with 8mm shanks, so you have a collet here, a reducer if you like, fitted into the collet to compensate for that, because it takes up to a 12mm shank, which is quite a good size router bit you can put in there. Now they do make a smaller one. The model number I don't have offhand, but what put me off it was the fact that it took only up to an 8mm shank, and I felt that was a limitation. You might want to route something a bit bigger, not be able to do it just because the piece doesn't fit. No, so you slot your bit into the collet neatly. You may need to occasionally work to pull that out, or you may have to completely remove the collet grip nut and clean it every so often, and maybe counterintuitively even oil it a little bit, because you'll find with a bit of dust on there you just have a job getting bits to slide in and out neatly of the collet, and you've got plenty of margin to tighten it. So you press your button down, this orange button, as far as it will rotate, and what I would probably suggest is if you have it on its back like this, couple of turns, couple of turns like that, quarter turns they are really. You don't need to go nuts. I mean, you don't need to go mental. With that, it's very unlikely your piece is going to slide out. I think that's very unlikely. And then you can work with this, set your depth as you will. I would personally build a little base so that you're not worrying about dunting the bit out of position or damaging the bit itself or the work surface, or maybe you're working somewhere a bit more delicate. So you set your depth as you will and tighten it up, and that's what you're up to there. So the thing I'll be for demonstrating next would be how you would use the guide for this, because you might be saying, well, we'll just use some kind of bit fitted with a bearing. Okay, and that would solve your problem. I'm going to show how that works too if you don't know how bearing bits work. You notice that there's nothing attached to this bit. It's just a straight bit, and there's nothing that controls the depth into the workpiece that you can cut. Obviously you set the depth that you cut down to, but you can eat into the piece as much as you want. So how do you control that? Well, that's what you need this guide for. So you've got that fixed in position. Okay, it can't go anywhere. Let's imagine you know 2 is the height you're going to work to. Let's just say that's what it is for the sake of argument. Come along, slot this into position. You could slot it in from either side, but I always work from this side. And you say, okay, it doesn't really matter where that goes to. We're going to say that's the depth I want. And you tighten up these 2 screws here, and then your guide can't go anywhere. What you'll notice is that there's a little screw underneath here that you can slacken off, and that's for making minor adjustments. Now, these numbers, exactly what they relate to and how precise they are is anyone's guess, but it does slacken off the guide a little bit without you having to actually slide the bar in and out of the machine, which is not an accurate way of working at all. This, I find, gives me enough of a margin to move the whole machine in very slightly or move it out very, very slightly. And I find that that's normally enough. Depends how precisely you want to work. If you're used to working with CNC, that may not be enough for you, but this is not CNC, okay? You're talking about doing basic edging and making lids for boxes to a reasonable degree of margin, reasonable margin of error so that things aren't actually shaking around. Incidentally, one of the things you're going to have to watch when you set your piece down, you work to this piece here. I've actually made a modification to this, another way of doing this if you want, which I can also demonstrate. If the router tips at all in the process, the circular bit will leave marks you see how neat the cut is generally. So these are not expensive bits at all. They're a set we bought from manufactured by Bosch, and the entire box I think they were under 40 euros, for the amount of routing we're doing at the moment. For general cuts, it's more than adequate. So they're a neat cut. This is a piece of birch. And you'll notice that in general the cut is very, very neat all the way around. What you will notice though is if the machine drops at all, it will dig in, okay, because there's nothing to control that. So you have to keep the machine stable yourself. Okay, let's imagine then that what you want to do is route something like a lid or a drawer bottom, and we're going to use this system that I was just explaining. Okay, so the idea here, what you're trying to do essentially is cut all the way around the lid, which you assume fits flush to the edges of your box, and remove what was equivalent to the width of the walls, if you like, of the box, so that it drops in like that. This one is far from perfect. It has a little bit more play than I would like. Other ones have worked out better. Because it's a nice old box, I decided to include it. So the basic idea is that what you're trying to do is remove the width of material from the lid, and the depth isn't too important. If you've got, I don't know, 3 or 4 mil removed in height, if it's snug in terms of width, it'll probably fit really nicely. So let's imagine for the sake of argument then that you've established that, and this is the lid you want to cut for whatever box it is, okay? One of the things you'll probably notice, this little disc clips in the inside of like this, clips in the inside, and I personally don't use this very often. I would imagine this is for smaller router bits. When they exceed a certain diameter, obviously they fit through the main slot, but they wouldn't fit through with this piece on. I imagine this is to stop debris and whatever junk from flying through as you're routing. Let's just forget about it. So I've used my little tower at the back. I've set that to 2 here, because let's arbitrarily say that's roughly the height I want. Plunge the router, lock it in place with the lever, and for most operations you'll find this is more than adequate. If you decide what you're doing is maximum precision and you want to guarantee there's absolutely no vertical movement, you could use your locking nuts. It's not a particularly fast way of doing anything, but it may be the case that you want to repeat the same operation lots of times. Maybe you want to do it lots and lots of times, and you want them all exactly the same. For example, drawer bottoms, if they have to fit, it might be worthwhile investigating that. Okay, similarly, if that's the router bit down, remember not to rest the machine on the bit itself, but rather on its base, which is, I find, quite wide. Sometimes these are round, and so they don't give you a lot of coverage. It's one of the things I like about this router. It's a nice stable base here. So your guide is against the piece. That's what's setting the width of your cut. And if you were to look at it from underneath, just make sure you're not doing anything daft. Make sure that the relationship between the height you've set and the thickness of the piece is adequate. Otherwise you're going to cut too far through and the edge is just going to snap off. Especially critical in materials like MDF. They don't really have much in terms of internal structure, so you've got to make sure you don't cut too much of the material away. For the purposes of showing how this works, I'm not going to put on the mask because it's a bit of a hassle. But fine dust like this, I strongly recommend that you work with a respirator of some kind. And keep an eye on the filters, make sure that they're not for spraying paint or something, make sure that they're designed for fine particles. Because this is something that in the long term will cause you respiratory problems. Okay, so we're all plugged in here. My homemade adapter for the extraction is on. The little Kersher unit that we use here, little Kersher extractor there, little vacuum cleaner, served us very well. It's a bag system. Inexpensive and reliable. We use it for all our extraction, for all our machines. If a company are offering you proprietary extraction and you find it expensive or gimmicky, sometimes air extraction can be an area where you think they're trying to suck more money out of you than they're trying to suck dust out of your project. It might be an option. I think it's very, very reasonable. So we're just going to go ahead and do one of these. I'm not going to put on the mask, like I said. Eye protection is critical. You never know when a router bit may shatter. You could be unlucky. You never know when you could have some, I don't know, a nail in a workpiece, a screw, and it could cause any number of things to go wrong. So first thing, eye protection. One thing to do with sound. Sound and vibration, obviously those two things are linked, are not well worked out in general with Virutex tools, in my opinion. That's just in my opinion. I have no decibel readings for this whatsoever to back that up. It's my impression based on other tools that I've seen of the same capacity. They give me the impression that they don't really work very hard on the idea of vibration and sound. It's quite a noisy tool, and then you add obviously the dust extraction. Obviously it gets even noisier. Okay, let's give it a go. Sit back, nice and neat on top. Make sure you're not too close when you start your joint, and power up. Nice and neat here. So, you see this does produce a lot of dust. If you're not used to working with MDF, it's something you probably want to consider. So, the width of the cut, you notice there was a sort of thin strand of material here which breaks away very, very easily. You could adjust this by making an initial cut without actually pushing against the guide. Just, let's say, a rough cut to remove some of the width of the material, or you could just use a wider bit. But let's say in broad brush terms, that's the kind of cut you're looking for. Okay, now, things to bear in mind with this. If you're using a guide, what is your guide doing? Is it working magic? No, it's not working magic. If the initial edge that you start with is rough, this is just a rough piece of junk MDF I picked out of the off-cut pile. So it will transfer loosely, it will loosely transfer whatever irregularity there is in this edge into your cut. Now, if you have a long guide and you work to the stability of the guide, it's performing a kind of average of the cut. So what it's going to do is it's going to give you a neater line than if you use a bearing. This is one of the considerations that you might want to have. You say, I have to do a long straight edge, but I'm not convinced 100% by the edge that I'm working to. You say, sand it then. Okay, it might be the case that you're not in a position to do that. I don't know what you're trying to do. Imagine you're working to a drop leaf, for example, and for some reason one part of the edge has warped, and you can't work with you don't want to copy that warping. You want to keep your line average and straight. You might want to stick on a guide and follow my tip here of having the guide as long as possible. That'll even out any irregularity that you find in the edge of the workpiece. Okay. Okay, so the exact same thing then. We're going to use the same test piece. I've just flipped it round and just going to demonstrate, in case anyone's not familiar with how this works, how a router bit with a bearing works. Now you can see a bearing is a very simple idea to understand. It's just a little wheel. Now, what you need to do is make sure that that doesn't protrude below the bottom of the workpiece. You'll find that this won't work terribly well if what you're trying to cut, I've got a 45-degree bit here, you have to have enough space that the bearing can stay comfortably on this edge here. It can run along this edge and your cut is happening above it. What you'll find is if you're working with too thin a material, you're trying to cut away material and also follow an edge, and what you'll find is the bearing will slip below it, and when it does that, the router bit doesn't have AI built into it. It will just cut in, it will just eat into your material, and it'll create an uneven edge. So you have to think about that before you start. That may be one of the reasons that you want to consider using the guide, because it may be that there's just simply not enough of a margin to operate with a bearing. So one of the things about this machine in general maybe is you probably, if you're watching this, you probably see that I can lift it with one hand, but it's not comfortable. Now, I didn't actually, I would include the specifications for this so that people can see, but it's one of these things that I think for the type of tool it is, it could probably be lighter. But when you make things lighter, what happens? You maybe make them a bit flimsier too. And I think that the modus operandi of the company appears to be make things solid, make everything hard, make everything, as rigid as possible, and then you just have to deal with a little bit of extra weight. At least things aren't going to be snapping off it, right, left, and center. But my partner, business partner, can use this tool, but she's not particularly comfortable with it. Finds it a little bit heavy, a little bit cumbersome. And the smaller model may have been a better idea for her, because we don't often work with the 12mm shanks. But it's one of these things you go, if you're going to be working with it for a long period of time, you're going to be doing an awful lot with it. The vibration in the air, maybe the weight might make it just overall a little bit cumbersome for some people. So she, as a reference, weighs about just over 50 kilos, and probably just over 80. And we're both of normal build, for our weight. So that would give you a sort of reference. If you think, no, I'm fit, I'm strong, I weigh 100 kilos, and I'm a bodybuilder, this will feel like a toy to you. If you weigh roughly, 45, 50 kilos, and you're thinking you're going to be handling this tool a lot, working with 8mm shanks, buy a smaller router. Simple as that. That's what I would probably recommend. Okay, so I just demonstrate that quickly how the bearing bit works. Same idea. Make sure that you're in position here. I would always drop down on top of your base. That way you're sure where you are. You've got stability. You don't have to do this on the edge of your workpiece. You drop down, lock it in position tightly, with the whole base secure. So you're not monkeying about, because remember, this is plugged in. Okay, if you're unlucky and you do something unstable here and you switch it on, hey, that's what you can do to avoid accidents. So much the better. Okay, then you position your piece. Because you've got the bearing going all the way around, it doesn't really matter what way you position it, but think about where this is going to be, your extraction. If you knock against this, if you hit it, it'll try and deviate the course of the machine. So you want to keep that well away from clamps, keep that well away from everything. Similarly with cables, you're very unlikely to hit them, but just bear in mind where they are. Keep cables and all that kind of stuff away from your cut area. And if you were to drop down again, you would see we've got a 45-degree bit here, and you see there's comfortably enough space for that bearing to run along this edge all the way through its course. You see, you take a look at it and you go, oh, it thins in the middle where there's a handle, or there's a piece here that's maybe, not quite the same width or not uniform. You go, if that bearing's not in contact with this edge here, this bit will cut in. That may be what you want, I don't know, you may be following a shape, exactly as you would be with the copying piece that you install. That bearing will rigidly copy whatever surface it's running along. So bear that in mind. That's probably something that's the only thing I would say with this. Okay, so fire away. what do you notice? This section here, where when I start cuts like this, I habitually have I don't start right at the end. Now, if you're going right the way around this piece, you're probably going to want to formulate some kind of this is maybe going to be a static piece you can just work around, and maybe a tabletop. It may be something you don't need to clamp down. Because I have to clamp it down, I'm considering, you know, all the edges here. What you would do probably with this, if you weren't fussed about a little bit of burnout, you would do a back cut, you know. As you do with everything, with any power tool, make sure that you're standing stably. You know, make sure that you've got reasonable, you know, balance when you're doing this. The tool is heavy, and if it catches, or you have to do a back cut, or you hit something, you need to be stable. You could lose balance, and what you don't want is to be falling over with the spinning or the revolutions it's doing there. So you could start again with this. If you're going to go right round the piece, you could orientate it so that two edges are exposed and start with one. There are many ways to route. This is not exactly an exercise in showing you how routing works. Just the principle is to understand that copying mechanism there, the bearing, will run along this piece here and will allow the cut to happen immediately on top of it. Anywhere where you deviate from it, you push in, you pull out, whatever it is, the bearing can't control the cut and it will spoil it. So you're going to make sure that your edges are neat. Okay? Back cuts. Again, I mentioned back cuts in another part of the video. It's the sort of thing, it's a risk you take. It may cause burnout. It may cause pieces to chip. In MDF or materials like that, I've never experienced any problem, but that depends on each user. In practice, what you could do here is you could position the machine very precisely, just beyond the start of where you want the cut to begin. And then when you move in, you have to be wary of this, because part of the reason is, if I start like this, okay, I go pam, I move in, and I know that the bearing is going to come into direct contact with that edge. If I start back here, what may happen? I may deviate because I can't see where the bit is, and I may go around this corner. And it may be the case that you don't want that to happen. Now, in that case, what do? Very simple. You need a sacrificial piece here. Something that's going to keep that edge flush so that you cannot possibly go around this corner, as it were. So you take a piece of junk MDF or whatever it is you've got lying around, plywood, chipboard, and you clamp it or screw it here so that it can't go anywhere, level with this edge, and then you can bite into it if you want. And that'll stop you from going in the opposite direction and spoiling your front edge cut.